The experiment of statehood in Africa is currently on its knees. If you study Africa properly, you realize that this thing that we call nations is under threat every single day. Look at the Biafra secession that happened in the 1900s. Look at the Tigray secession that is currently plaguing Ethiopia. Look at the Somalia crisis. Look at the Ambazonia crisis in Cameroon, Western Sahara, and everywhere else, even in Africa, in Kenya. We have tribal conflicts each and every day, and it's because of something that I think they mentioned, which is how did Africans exist prior to colonizations? We existed in African ethno-kingdoms that were small and compact and largely homogeneous because everyone had the same tribe, same language, and same values. The idea that we are going to form one African superstate and somehow everybody will sit together and sing Kumbaya is a lie. It's a lie, and I think I'm going to be showing you why. In my framing, I'm going to tell you one thing. One, we don't oppose the continental unity. In fact, what we are against is the full integration of the African state to form one superstate called the United States of Africa. We support initiatives to help build collective action, but countries maintain their sovereignty. Look at political organizations we formed like the AU, the EAC, the SADC, the ECOWAS, COMESA, AFTA. All these organizations are aimed at achieving all the benefits that they are trying to explain, but the one thing they don't do is ask Africans to cede their sovereignty into one superstate and somehow agree to be governed as one country. What we tell you from opposition is that we are fine with Africans collectivizing, we are against sovereignty. The tipping point in this debate is not just the idea that Africans should come together, because that will happen in our side anyway. What they must defend, and what they have refused to defend in the entire first speech, which was very confusing, is why Africans must all cede sovereignty to one political power. We must all become one state, led by one president, led by one economy, led by one group of people. They must defend that. They can't just come and say, Africa must be unified, we have problems, and this will solve all of our problems. Secondly, they don't even explain to us how this solves our problems. All they say is that there's a divide and conquer rule that currently exists in status quo, but when you form one state, what makes it, in fact, you make it easier for them to divide us, because all they need to do is capture those at the top, and everything else falls downwards. They don't explain how the solvency of the problems in Africa comes from when you form one state, and I think that's where they fail. So what is the comparative? The comparative is an USA versus EU situation. What Paul refused to tell you about USA is that at a point when USA was forming one state, it was one homogeneous group of people. They were all white. They were all settlers. They were all, like, it was a very homogeneous group. Unlike Africa, we have 3,000 different ethnocentric groups that have very different identities, languages, and interests. How do you able to bring all these people together is a myth. In fact, we are more similar to Europe, where they had different tribes, like the Nords, the Vikings, the Balkans. Those people, and they figured out that the only way they can be able to exist together is to form one way in which they can all collectivize, called the EU, but every country maintaining its own interest and its own sovereignty, so that it can serve the needs of the people who are within that state. And I think that's a better solution for us. Yes.
Even though a lot of the people in the states are white, why do Irish people still celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and the German people with like Oktoberfest and those kinds of things?
At a point where the US was formed, these were all settlers from Europe. They all came together as pilgrims to the US. They were all a homogeneous group of people. They were all people who had come from the same place. They were pilgrims. So that's why it was easier for them to collectivize. Yes, they can celebrate St. Patrick's Day and all other forms of holidays in the US. But also you need to realize that over time, US has proliferated with many different cultural groups that have come in, which has made it even more diverse than it was at the point of inception, making it very different. So anyway, the cultural differences. Before the colonization, Africans existed in kingdoms which were small and culturally homogeneous, therefore making them viable and effective to rule. With diverse ethnic groupings in Africa today, it is near impossible to find consensus among all these groups. The trend today is shifting towards actually smaller homogeneous groups. Look at what happened in Sudan. They had to split the north and the south. Ethiopia had to form semi-autonomous regions, each ruled by their own tribes, the Amhara, the Tigray, and all these people. Look at Cameroon and the Ambazonia secession. Look at the idea of the Volta region in Ghana. Even Kenya, for us to be able to remain as a state post-2207, we had to form smaller groups called what? Counties, so that we give people more proximity to their rulers and the people who are making decisions for them. The trend has actually been to form smaller states, not to create bigger states that make us more divided and more away from what people who are ruling us. Why is this important? It's because of the principles of democracy. What is the principles of democracy? We need accountability, participation, and representation. For any of these things to be able to happen in Africa, people need to feel connected, and they need to feel that they are closer to their governments rather than far away. Why? Because when you dilute the voices of the few people, that makes it much worse. Think of it like this. Right now, universal suffrage says your vote is 1 out of 40 million. And at a county, it's maybe 1 out of 400,000. In their world, it's 1 to 1.3 billion people. What say do you have in the ruling of that government? What say do you have into the policies they make? Your voice has been made so minuscule, it cannot be able to create the impact that you want. What Africa needs today is not a devoid government that is even further away from the people. We need to bring people, or we need to bring the government much closer to the people, and that is why we believe that the status quo is what we need to maintain, and let's not support a world in which people feel even further away from their governments. Thank you so much.
So, that was the first